Hello there and welcome everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live. I'm super happy to welcome you because we're continuing our learning journey, our virtual learning journey today with somebody connecting more closely to me than ever before. Because lately I have been interviewing and I have been honored to have so many guests from Asia on my Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live. Today I have somebody usually being based in Asia, but she's in Switzerland now. You know that in the last weeks, we have been talking a lot about how to facilitate in a virtual context. We talked a lot about liberating structure as a method. And with Isman last week, we experienced how to implement liberating structure in a mirror board or in any kind of virtual setting. And it was super exciting. We're also talking about how to facilitate virtual trainings that are engaging. And one thing that I'm a strong believer of, but you know that I love the virtual space, is that in the virtual space, we do have possibilities to create learning journeys that we do not have entirely to the same extent in a normal in-present setting. And I'm happy because today I can welcome here on my show Melanie Martinelli from The Learning Gym, who is an expert in designing learning journey for companies from across the globe. So Melanie, welcome on the stage of Virtual Space here on LinkedIn Live.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you.
Hey
I just forgot we're actually doing this in English. No, we could have done it in German as well, you and I.
Absolutely, absolutely. We started talking in English because we met each other over LinkedIn, but then we figured out, me coming from Austria, Melanie being based or coming from Switzerland, there is something else we have in common than only the virtual learning journeys, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic. Melanie, you know, I told you beforehand, we are streaming to 3 channels. So we are on Facebook, we are on LinkedIn Live, our main channel here, and we're also on YouTube. So welcome to all of you. And I see already on each platforms, I see people connecting. So fantastic. Also, let us know where are you connecting from. So use the chat if there is a possibility, and use the chat. Let us know where you're connecting from. And also throughout the whole conversation, engage with us. Let us know your comments, your thoughts, and your questions, please. So, Melanie, it's so great that we are now also connected here again on LinkedIn in my LinkedIn Live show. I'd have a question maybe to start with. So your background before you founded The Learning Gym, which is your company called that you founded it a few years ago, I believe, right? So what is your background? How did you get into facilitation and also virtual facilitation?
So yeah, it's a good question, and it's actually nothing to do with facilitation or learning. So my background is in finance. I studied finance, believe it or not, which is actually pretty useful now as an entrepreneur. It sometimes helps. I also study cross-cultural communication, and I actually started off my career about 17 years ago in sales and marketing in India. And one thing led to another. To cut a long story short, I started supporting cross-cultural virtual teams in better collaborating together in the IT space. And just by fluke, I kind of started facilitating, coaching, training, whatever you want to call it, to help these teams work better together. And somehow I realized that's really interesting. So I started educating myself, upskilling, loads of things linked to learning, quit my sales career, and then went into the training domain. So before The Learning Gym, I ran a soft skill training company, and we already did quite a lot of virtual trainings in 2008 when the financial crisis hit and a lot of travel budgets were hit. But yeah, thinking back to 2008, the kind of trainings we used to do, let's not go there. I wouldn't be really proud of that.
And it's so great. I'm also just all of you out there, and I see you've seen that there are already comments, people connecting from London, Montreal, Austria, Vienna, Hola, Javier. I assume from a Spanish-speaking country. So absolutely fantastic. Thanks a lot for your comments, and use the chat function. And definitely, if you have a time, take a note of Melanie's company, The Learning Gym. Connect with her on LinkedIn and have a look, because she also has a fantastic accelerator program for virtual trainers, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, we learned the hard way, in 2008, what virtual trainings maybe should not be. And it's actually interesting because it's really linked to, our topic today about learning journeys. Back in 2008, it was really just events we did. People just came to us and said, take a 2-day training and do 2 days of virtual training. And that's what we did. I remember getting up at 6 a.m, and really doing 8 hours of nonstop virtual training for 2 days. No breakout rooms, no nothing. So, yeah.
We feel back as it was in June with many organizations who stopped using Zoom, and we had to switch to Microsoft Teams, and it was like also boom. Oh my God.
Yeah. I just finished some trainings on MS Teams this week. Yeah, that's another topic that will just park for now.
Absolutely. So that is absolutely fantastic. Thanks a lot for sharing. I know that your organization, that the Learning Gym, is also doing a lot of work together with Kirkpatrick's
Yeah.
training evaluation model, and I think this is also something why we too definitely want to believe, or we believe in being able to sort of raise the bar for learning from a reaction level to a behavioral level in the virtual space. But let us see why we think that. So what is your opinion, Melanie? If we think about learning journeys and the virtual space, what is the benefit and why?
So, yeah, so I mean, as you said, I started working, with the Kirkpatricks pretty closely about 10 years ago, in actually becoming their first certified facilitator over in India, where I used to be based until July this year. And when we talk about, really making behavioral change happen and driving performance, there's a lot of research out there without, going into all of it, but it kind of sums up that one thing that really helps is when people get support over a longer period, just kind of giving them a lot of knowledge. I think we all know that in a training session, yes, you can build a lot of cognitive skills. You can maybe build, of course, some skills and awareness, maybe some confidence, commitment, but there's more than that it takes to really get people to apply what they've learned and really achieve the desired results. And one thing, and this is, linked to someone that also used to work very closely with the Kirkpatricks and has actually come up with his own methodology around high performance learning journeys, Professor Robert Brinkerhoff. He really kind of did a lot of research in this, saying, there's something that we need to do to support people in the application. And part of that is on the job training, but also maybe spacing the learning, so that people have more opportunities to practice, to revisit the skills that they learned on the knowledge. And while I've always believed in this, for very long, there was always a little bit of a barrier in really implementing it in the face-to-face environment, especially in global teams, because it's very costly to keep bringing people back into one place. And hence, while I think there were a lot of people in companies as well supporting this idea of stretching and building a learning journey with loads of different elements of, action learning and peer coaching and other aspects, manager support, it was financially very often not viable. And the virtual space, really kind of makes that a lot easier, I find. Even though I was not until March a big fan of, facilitating virtually, you kind of start realizing that there's a lot of opportunities in it as well. And one is to help people create for them a learning opportunity that is more than just the event, and really support them in the application of what they learn.
Absolutely. I totally believe the same. And that's honestly why I was pretty happy to say so, that all my live trainings this fall and also in the summer semester or in the spring period, they were moved to the virtual space, because I told everybody we need to split it up. So I never did. And I was lucky that the organizations I was working with, they agreed to do that. So we split our 8-hour trainings into 4-hour sessions. and it went perfectly. And I saw such a difference. I redesigned my material, and I saw a difference even if you only split it up into 2 sessions that are happening even in 2 weeks, because people in between, they might get a peer activity, a coaching activity, or some reading material, whatever it is. And until the next time, you can advance in a different way. And maybe even, and that's my thought, maybe even make up for the time that things go slower in the virtual space somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, to add to this, I think, when we speak about learning journeys, a lot of people, I think that it's just about doing something before the session, then you have the session, and then after. So kind of, the typical pre, during, and post, approach to design. But a real learning journey, especially in the virtual world, there's so much more to it. It's really about peer collaboration and these different assignments in between, and revisiting aspects as well. And it just gels pretty well with a lot of the learning theories out there about, reducing cognitive overload, for example. And just to kind of give you an example on this, and of course, this is not bulletproof research. This is really just my own evidence that I've gained in some of my programs. The Kirkpatrick program, the certification program used to be a 2-day face-to-face program. And then people have a certification assignment to complete within a month. And we used to run it, pretty successfully face-to-face for many years. But we always noticed that people really struggled in finishing their certification assignment. And it took them multiple rounds and support from us to really get it to a level that they were happy with and that actually certified them. And one of the main reasons when we did root cause analysis and spoke to them, a lot of them reported it was just too much to take in. It's highly complex. We are now running the same certification in 5 modules, 2.5 hours each, over 3-4 weeks, with assignments in between. And in the first few batches that we had this year, the quality of the final certification assignment, I mean, there's nothing to compare it to before. And again, that's just one small example. It's anecdotal. It's not bulletproof research. But that's another thing I think that really becomes possible in the virtual space.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Melanie, let me pick up on a few comments here. So we see, thanks a lot. Pari is saying, lovely seeing us together, both of us. And thank you for sharing your expertise and energy with us. Thanks a lot, Pari. We also had a small discussion. Maybe you want to pick up on that. And Samine was asking whether we should stop referring to soft skills as being soft. They are vital skills. And I do see that there is some agreement. Also, Amelie said absolutely. And I love it. Vital skills. Never went into that discussion before, but it sounds absolutely fantastic. And what we also know is, yes, Gary is mentioning, so he's saying with or without Corona, the trend has been towards learning solutions for efficiency and effectiveness for some time now. Definitely. But I also must say that for me, it was almost impossible, even though I designed for effectiveness, for example, it was impossible to sell 3 half-day shots for a multinational, because it's just impossible. They fly in 3 times, whoever is participating in my trainings. Maybe I should think about my sales strategy there, or my arguments, but my arguments usually are bulletproof research, because I'm coming from research, and even though it's just difficult, but it is fantastic. So we are having more questions. And again, another calling from Charles. Thanks a lot, Charles, for sharing. Soft skills are so hard to get right. Absolutely.
And
Let
Barbara,
me pick up. Go ahead.
If we can actually just build on this soft skill thing, and I apologize for calling it soft skills, it's just what's kind of the trend, what's what we used to call it in my previous organization. But I would absolutely agree, they're not soft, they're absolutely vital. And as Charles also says, they're actually very difficult to build. Here again, the link, to the learning journey, especially with skills, let's say communication skills or negotiation skills. I'm just working on a learning journey around virtual negotiation skills. I mean, people understand the theory behind negotiation pretty fast. But what really helps you become a better negotiator is practice, 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 practice. feedback, feedback, feedback. And again, in the earlier days, it used to be a one-day, maybe face-to-face training where people had one or two opportunities to practice and get some feedback. Now we can stage this and, stagger it over a much longer duration. And we really see people improve, because one thing that also leads to your earlier question about what helps people apply what they've learned and make the behavioral change, if there's reinforcement and an opportunity to actually apply it, reflect on the experience, go back with some more questions. And so it's great to see that, especially in that space of hard skill, vital skills, soft skills, whatever you want to call it, I think the virtual space is a real opportunity, because we can provide a much richer practice environment over time and engage the learners in ongoing feedback and coaching.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. It's a fantastic point. If we think about designing learning journeys, so maybe we should talk about, and then we come to the skill set question that Gary is posing, but let's talk about, give us some examples, Melanie, and I'll provide some examples of my practice. What are like learning journeys look like that you are designing currently?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I just want to say is that, very often people think the learning journey is just something that you kind of space over time. And time is really just one component of the learning journey that, yes, of course, it is kind of, a journey over a certain period of time. But what we also try and take into consideration are actually how can we create spaces for people to meet in between modules. So be it before, and in the virtual space, this could of course be that you have something like a Miro, mural, or concept board, or a canvas where people already start their introductions on it. You start posting things linked to the content and start engaging them. There's also platforms, that have inbuilt kind of commenting features, such as on Facebook and so forth, that you can have that social peer learning component that is really crucial in the learning journey as well. And then you keep having these little bursts of input, where, yes, you kind of make sure that whatever content was maybe shared with them as pre-work gets revisited, make sure that everyone has a shared understanding, but mainly use the live virtual session for practice. So one thing that we really try and do is content per se, stuff that's really just knowledge, we try and kind of put it into the asynchronous mode of learning, so that people can just consume this at their own speed, but then come into the live session ready with questions, examples, and really have an opportunity in the live session for practice. Very often they are cohorts that we built of, peer learning groups that then get some assignments in between modules that they have to complete. We also try, whenever possible, to involve the managers, because one thing that we know from a lot of the research linked to Brinkerhoff and the Kirkpatricks is that behavioral change very often needs the support of the managers. So be it that you might have a conversation with your manager on the job, or you do an assignment together. Let's say it's presentation skills, maybe doing a mock presentation for the manager, get some feedback. Then again, you might come back to another module. So, so there's loads of different things that get incorporated, such as virtual tools to get to know each other, asynchronous ways of just discovering the key content, live sessions to practice, get feedback, clarify things, social learning cohorts, and the managerial support.
And I think one thing that, of course, the social learning aspect is also something that we all trainers have always used also in an in-present setting, because it is the group work component. It is when they're working together in smaller discussion groups or whatever kind of activity you're using. But I also believe in the virtual space, it is so powerful to use a triad learning or a peer learning, whatever it is. And I also wanted just to come back to one thing you said, because very often when we talk about learning, I hear like, well, learning through experience. Learning through experience is fantastic, but of course we need to reflect upon the experience. And I also have the feeling that in an in-present setting, we often, I'm not sure if it is us, the trainers, who forget about that. We don't have time, because usually you don't take as much time for like, so now take your 15 minutes reflection or something, because People get nervous, they look around, it's something sometimes weird in an in-person setting, and the virtual space provides you with an opportunity that is amazing. Even share the reflection anonymously or not anonymously, then with the other people, the other participants. And that is so powerful, because then you have the reflective part, the social learning part, all together in whatever mural, whatever board or whatever tool you're using.
And if I build on this, just to give a few very concrete ideas on the reflection part, I think that is so important. And I actually also wonder, why don't we do it more in the face-to-face? And I think some of it is just we want to just maximize that time together. We kind of feel we've been paid for a full day, so we kind of need to keep going the full day. There are so many things in the session that you can do for reflection as well, such as putting people into their own breakout room and just give them a quiet moment to reflect. But also in between the modules, one thing we just did for one of our learning journeys this week is, after the module last week, we had asked people to kind of revisit everything that they've learned so far and compose 2 review questions. 2 questions, that allow them to view the content, but they need to be sure to know the answers. And then we actually paired them up with each other, and they questioned and tutored each other. And what everyone reported afterwards is, the learning really happened in creating those questions. That was the reflection part, that you had this time between modules to go back and really think again about what you've learned, come up with questions, and then revisit it a week later.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking about one of my projects that we talked about before, and we also have a lovely way of using reflective activities. So we, for example, we are asking our students of the Global Case Study Challenge. We have 600 students working together for 2 months in global virtual teams. We ask them to do a virtual team building activity. They get a lecture from us and everything. And then we are not grading on the virtual team building. We are grading upon the reflection of the virtual team building, because that's how we close, not only experiencing a virtual team building that is already pretty unique, because how many students have ever done a virtual team building, but we ask them afterwards to follow some of our questions on process, group dynamics, quality, or length, whatever. We have like different questions formulated. They need to reflect as a team on what happened during the group team building.
Absolutely. And I mean, there are so many ways, and I mean, sometimes I laugh at myself for saying this, because I'm really not the most tech savvy and tech loving person. But I started really liking this virtual space because I realized it's actually giving me the opportunity to design and execute trainings the way I've always wanted to do it, in that more journey format, where you don't just feel rushed. Like, you really have the time to build in that reflection. You have the time to build in those social activities, which just very often in a 1 or 2 day face-to-face, it happened and people had a good time, but then it was over and people were dispersed, and well, out of sight, out of mind. Whereas here, somehow, because we are all in a virtual space together, I also noticed that people are more inclined to reach out to each other. So in some of our programs where we didn't even really design social, elements between the sessions, participants started doing it themselves. They started reaching out because they keep seeing each other over a period of time. And so they started connecting with each other by themselves, just to get that peer learning and support.
And that's interesting, because we had the same experience. Now, funny that you're saying that. In our educator certification program also, we do have social elements because they need to do a group work. But also one of the educators initiated, hey, don't we want to get to know each other better and more in depth, and initiated a Zoom socialization call. And that was really amazing to see the dynamics out of this. So also, let me pick up. Charles is saying there, I like the idea of bringing practice and experience to the learning space by having assignments in between the sessions. Absolutely. And then we can use the collective knowledge in the room. Absolutely. Thanks a lot for sharing. We have another comment here. This model is very interesting. He has raised it to professionals here in Chile. Cheers. Thanks a lot, Javi, for sharing. Do you recall which model he means? Is it the Kirkpatrick?
Could be high performance learning journey, could be Kirkpatrick. Maybe Javier can tell us in the comments once more. But
Javier, let us know which one you mean. It came in a bit time delayed. So let me put up one question that Gary was asking beforehand already. So I totally agree with this. Thanks. What does it mean for the skill set trainers need? So, and just building up a little bit on a conversation on a LinkedIn Live, a tremendous one with Joshua we had, is that our theory was that now in the virtual space, it really sort of separates the trainers and the really good trainers. Because what we believe is that you need really a good didactical and creative basis to be a good trainer in designing journeys in the virtual space now. Yeah. Let us know, Melanie, what do you think? Skill set for trainers.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree that, I see it in the programs that we run. I mean, we run a virtual train to train, and we have people coming with 20, 30, 35 years of solid experience as designers and facilitators in the face-to-face environment. And they really come in a very vulnerable way sometimes to us as well, saying, I just don't know anymore how to manage all of this. All the skills that I used to have, they just don't seem to really work anymore. I can't read the audience and so forth. So there's a lot of the facilitation skills as well, but also different design skills. I think because your needs analysis, first of all, I think is even more important to really go back and understand what are people expected to do. I'm not saying this is not important face-to-face, don't get me wrong, but I think the bar has been raised in the virtual space because we're designing learning journeys where we also want to involve the managers, or we want to make sure they get opportunities to apply what they've learned on the job. We need to understand the business a lot more. And I think that's also very crucial. We need to spend more effort in understanding what's really happening in the environment that the learners are in on the job and design for that so that we can actually design meaningful in-between assignments. Because it's not only about that content that we're delivering in the session, we really want to build in all these practice, formats and the peer learning and the management support. And for that, you also need to collaborate a lot closer with the business and come up with much more relevant application examples. So I think the skill set is really also about understanding the business, but it is really also, from an instructional design perspective, this ability to really make a choice. What is content and learning that can be achieved in an asynchronous way? And what are things that can really only happen if there's feedback involved or live training? And I think we didn't really have to think about that before. So I think it just challenges a lot of our thinking, which, and I don't know what skill that is. Is it critical thinking? I'm not sure. But yeah, it's just a different element to the instructional design that's needed, because it's not just the delivery that's important, it's the design as well. And activities, also understanding technology, what is possible from an activity perspective, because content is easy to find. The key is how can you package it in the right, activity that achieves that desired purpose.
And you know what, this synchronous and asynchronous part that you were talking about, it reminds me of that, because this is also one of the biggest struggles of global virtual teams, because when we were thrown through the pandemic into being all remote workers, many of us relied only on synchronous communication, because that is what we mostly knew from our normal working experience. And that was the problem, because that's why we were all overwhelmed with 9 hours of conference calls every day, running in between one Zoom meeting to the other to your own toilet in your house. So that was crazy. And that is the same thing what you were saying here. We need to understand, what can we do synchronously? So being here at the same moment, or what should we do here? But what are things that we can do perfectly when not being at the same time in the same platform, to say so? And I think this is critical.
And you know what, as you say that, it actually makes me think of another very crucial skill. And I'm sure, everyone's going to laugh at that. But actually, I think it's the skill of, there's two things. One is acknowledging your own strengths and weaknesses, and actually accepting that you're probably not going to be an expert in everything. And that leads to the actual skill of having the courage to reach out for help and collaborate. In order to create a powerful learning journey, I think it's almost impossible that just one designer or facilitator creates that alone. You will have to collaborate. For example, I'm designing a very extensive learning journey for an America-based, US-based company, and it has massive components in the asynchronous, space. And the asynchronous space is not my forte. I come from a life environment, but I had to learn to collaborate and trust other people that have that expertise and leverage that, because we're using a platform called a New Springer, which allows us to create the learning journey on it. And I had no idea about that platform, so I had to start collaborating with people who know that platform and collaborate with people that have experience in creating videos and animated PowerPoints and all of these fancy digital things that go way beyond my skill set. So I think there's actually also the skill of just acknowledging that, that you cannot do it all alone, and hence reach out and collaborate with others.
Absolutely. I think this is a super important point, because we do know how important it was, for example, just to reach out and ask for help as that another colleague joins us to be a producer, right? Because we were overwhelmed with requests for virtual trainings, and sometimes we didn't have the capacity, and it worked perfectly, but it is about supporting each other. Absolutely. So what we see here, there are a few super interesting comments. Let me pick up on Charles' one. It was what we were discussing before. So Charles is saying that maybe we as trainers, we are afraid to bring the reflection part into the classroom because we fear it might be perceived as boring. Probably. We have another comment here from Gary. It was the implication of this is flipped learning. Learners love this. However, it means a huge paradigm shift for trainers. Yeah. And you know what, Melanie? This brings me to the question. I'm just thinking about, you were saying social learning before. There is another aspect or theoretical construct I was researching a lot. It's self-directed learning. Yeah. And of course, not only we as trainers are struggling with the virtual space, or some of us more, some of us less, but also learners, because many of us are not used to those learning journeys. Learning journeys in sync with synchronous and asynchronous elements, they require a higher level of self-directed learning skills. And that's also something we need to build upon. What do you think about that?
I couldn't agree more. I think this is, a big challenge. And I very often hear also clients or other, clients for me can both be internal L&D departments that I work with, but I also consult for a lot of training companies for their trainers and designers. And a lot of pushback we get on such ideas, but people are not going to complete the pre-work. People are not going to complete those in-between assignments. And yes, I agree. We've seen this happen as well, but I think there's a bigger question to that. And that's when what we call the necessities for success are just not established. And maybe people have not really understood what's in it for them. If this is just a training that's kind of mandated down to them to tick off the chart, it's pretty hard to kind of, get that engagement and participation. I think that's when you can just be happy that people are there, even though it's a waste of money. But, I think that goes really back to one of the key Kirkpatrick principles, and that is start with the end in mind. Unless there's a clear business need for a training and learning initiative and something that you're really trying to address, and you work closely with the participants and everyone else, really also identifying how this is useful to them and what's in it for them, I think then, self-motivation will be very low. So I think that goes back to other skills as well, of just doing solid needs analysis, partnering from the beginning to create that buy-in. And if that's there, I think, what I observe is when people sign up for a course through their own choice as well, I see a lot more participation in the learning journey as well. And also when people really see that what is offered to them has a significant impact or possible impact on their performance on the job. But if they don't see value in it, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
And you know what? There's a comment from Emily. Emily is saying co-development is also a great learning approach for highly skilled people to help each other into the brainstorming of a project, for example. Co-develop in general, or is it problem-based learning, what we very often use in a higher education context, for example, where learners, to say not students, because learners, they co-create the learning process. Thanks a lot, Amelie. A very, very important point. Absolutely.
And I think that's actually a very important point in a learning journey. You know, one thing you and I spoke about is this aspect of being learner driven as well. And I think that is also, if you want to create that engagement that people participate and really do all these assignments, it is about what's in it for them, but also making them part of that creation. And not just, stuffing them with all kinds of information that might just not be relevant, but even involve them. And I think you spoke in one of your sessions with Cassie as well, Labori, who is also very much into a lot of learner-driven simple activities. And one activity she likes to do, and we love it too, is the treasure hunt. Where you get people involved in a scavenger hunt to really just go out there and look for the content themselves and bring that content into the live session to talk about it. So I think it's very important to just keep in mind, how can we make it meaningful and relevant, for our learners?
Absolutely. And the scavenger hunt, what I love about it is it's not only that they are co-developing the learning process or the content, it's also the social aspect. Yeah. You can use elements of gamification if you use a bit of time element, whatever, if it fits the context. It's a very, very powerful tool. Yeah. And Cassie in her book has so many great ideas that I love to use.
Absolutely.
Very simple ones, not to say they are simplistic, they are simple, but they are super powerful.
Which is actually important for a learning journey as well. You don't want to design activities, especially between sessions, that are too much of a struggle. So one of the big mistakes I see a lot when learning journeys get designed is that the actual assignments that are given to learners in between sessions, they're just too much. And learners get lost in it. So sometimes less is more as well, and to keep it simple, which motivates them as well. Of course, not too simple, because we do want to stretch them from a learning perspective. Yeah. It's, again, that fine balance.
That's a super good point. That's really important to reflect upon, always to continue developing your trainings, your learning journeys, whatever they are about. Let me pick up here on one question from Charles again here. When I hear talking about activities, asynchronous learning, I'm reminded of my kids that go to school and are used to classical learning with homework. So what tips would you give to school teachers to understand their role has changed?
Oh, Charles, I'm so glad that my kid is only 14 months old, so I don't have to worry about this yet. I feel for you. But I do come from a teacher's family, by the way. So my mom is a kindergarten teacher, and there's other members in the family in that profession. And I actually also work as a university, teacher in Switzerland. And we have a lot of debates about this. And I think the education space traditionally really is, I don't want to say, because they are, just like in every profession, they are innovators and, early movers, and then there's others who lag behind. And I think, I don't know whether I have a specific advice, but I think the simple advice is also for educators, just like any facilitator and trainer, is to just sometimes look beyond what you're used to go a little bit beyond your just little box that you're comfortable in, and see what has changed, what opportunities are out there, collaborate with others. There's so many great resources available for, how to teach kids and involve them in learning as well. And we actually make use of a lot of kind of methods that you use in schools in our programs. For example, the scavenger hunt is actually something that is very often used in schools as well, that you involve the kids. And I think, just like I think it's important sometimes for corporate trainers to look into the academic field from a research perspective, I think it can be very useful for people in the educational field to sometimes also look a little bit outwards into the corporate sector and see what are maybe things they can pick up from each other. So I know that's not one advice, because there's so many teachers out there, but I really think the key thing is to embrace what's available and just try out things and see what works and what doesn't.
To be bold, to be creative. And Charles is saying, Melanie, all the best with growing your 14-month-old. Fantastic. We also have here another suggestion, murder mystery. I'm not sure if that would work for the school yet, but definitely for the for bigger participants or grown-up participants. Thanks a lot for that. And Charles is already asking, so I'm sure Amelie is sending out the link to the murder mystery as well. And Amelie is asking for the book. Amelie, I'm going to share it with you. Cassie Laborie, she's also a US-based trainer, fantastic virtual facilitator for 20 years, and she has a book about activities to create engagement in the virtual space. I will share the link later on here.
And I mean, yeah, Barbara, if you're talking about recommendations, I mean, I do think there's one other book that's also pretty, good to recommend, which actually, to come back to Charles' question, I would also recommend to a lot of the teachers. And Charles knows that it's Tiagi's and Matt's book, Lola, about live online learning activities. Again, also for people who are, not just very low-tech, simple activities where the focus is on creating engagement, not just entertaining people, but really helping learners discover content in a meaningful way and make sense of it.
Absolutely. So we have it there as well. If you Google that, for sure we'll find it, but we will also post the link later on. So Tiagi was in a webinar that Melanie, or in a discussion that Melanie hosted. I think it was last week, right?
Yeah, it was last week. Absolutely. We're doing actually a few sessions with him. So yeah, I mean, we actually also keep sharing a lot of activities on our LinkedIn page, by the way. So, I mean, if people are interested in very simple activities, we do keep posting our, experience, what works, what doesn't work. And I think that's really key even with learning journeys. I think sometimes people, and with training per se, I think we need to also go away from this desire that everything has to be perfect the first time we do it. I think sometimes you just need to, and I think the virtual space again has an advantage in that, because you don't just have them once. Most of the time you have the group multiple times. So you can try out something, and if it fails, you can still make up for it the next time. But it gives this, even as a trainer, the learning journey has a great opportunity for you to reflect on what works, what doesn't, and make adjustments. It's a lot harder to just adjust, in a 2-day event. Whereas when you have that time yourself as well to reflect on how did the learners respond to module 1 and to the first activities, you can incorporate that and fine-tune your session. So I actually think, very often the needs analysis that a lot of people struggle with, it doesn't have to be as perfect sometimes in the virtual space, because you're getting more insight into the actual needs of your learners as you work with them from session to session, which is something that earlier, if you would just do one solid needs analysis with the business before and then the participant, you took that and based on that, you designed, and that was it. Whereas now you have this flexibility of fine-tuning as the journey kind of progresses.
Mm-hmm. That's really fantastic. So also to all of you there, Melanie is tagged into the post. Also the Learning Gym LinkedIn company page is tagged into the post. If you follow Melanie, if you follow the Learning Gym, you get those advices and engage in the discussion. It's really fantastic. The last time we were talking, Shilpa was posting about, or forwarding a Learning Gym post about how to use breakout sessions. We were discussing openly about how we use it in our trainings. And you see here as well the webpage, thelearninggym.co. So don't miss that. Melanie, let me go back maybe to one last question, and maybe one comment I would like to pick up. So Liliana is saying there, it was a bit before, often the limits of tool will determine the design of the activity. It looks as reverse engineering. I believe that even though all the tools have their limits in the one or the other way, but I believe, and also that's like my synthesis of all the guests that I had here, all those intriguing conversations that I was able to do, is we still can be very creative, but we might just be bold and be creative in how we use the tools. Because, for example, as a simple renaming function can be used in 20 different ways, from just the name to the emotion they are feeling to the learning they want to achieve, up to a voting. We can use also the different functions or different tools that we have in very creative way. And it doesn't need to be super high tech, because sometimes we don't want to overwhelm anybody, right?
I could not agree more. And, just to kind of share one last story around this, because for me, this is really Yeah, it was the most challenging design project I ever worked on. And this was
yes,
for a
please share that.
NGO. This was for an NGO where we designed a project that was rolled out in Afghanistan and in Pakistan, where pretty much our participants did not have access to a laptop. They had not access to Zoom, MS Teams, WebEx, none of these tools that a lot of us are used to. And we had to go back and think about how can we create and take this face-to-face training, because it's not possible to travel there at the moment. How can we still create a learning experience for these students that engages them by just using WhatsApp or Telegram, just simple phone applications. And I can tell you, I broke my head about it because I was just limited exactly by this to tools. But wait a minute, how do I do a breakout room? How do I show something? But guess what? Again, by doing a mix of asynchronous learning, where we shared some of the content with them in simple documents that we sent to them because they had email access. And afterwards on WhatsApp, having simple WhatsApp group calls at breakout rooms, the learners had a fantastic experience. They were extremely grateful. The focus is on the learning experience. The tool is an enablement to that. I mean, it supports us to maybe make it more sexy, for lack of a better word, or not. But I think we should not get hung up only by the tool. There's a lot of things that you can do in a very simple way. It's a little bit more cumbersome. We did activities chatting. And then we got people, at one point to look for an image online that for them represented the learning. They each posted that image in the chat. We then looked at it. Yes, it's surely not as cool as to do that on Zoom, but you know what? It worked. And instead of not giving a learning opportunity to these students, we were able to give them a learning opportunity.
That sounds perfect. And I think Charles is summarizing it tremendously here, embracing what's out there. Absolutely. Be bold, be creative in how you use whatever platform you're using. Not all of us are going to be super Miro or mural designers, but we can also do a wonderful Google slide and share that and have a great impact if we think about why we're doing it. And exactly, so the focus is on the learning environments. The tools are an enabler, absolutely. And maybe I'm just looking at time. So we are already like at the end of our LinkedIn Live session, because we used to have a 42 minutes knowledge bite here. And I think maybe a last statement, picking up Joanna's questions. So what makes us good facilitators, Melanie? What would you say?
Well, that's a tough question to end it, especially because we're actually out of time. So I'm going to go with a very short answer. I think a good facilitator is focused on the end result and focused on the learner.
Mm-hmm. And that relates to flipped classroom. We had comments about flipped classroom there, and I think I want to end with a quote that Joshua introduced to me, and it was, "The one who is doing the talking is doing the learning, or the one who talks is the one who learns." And I think a good facilitator enables or provides the space. So I think that is really very important when we design learning journeys.
Absolutely.
Oh my God! So time, but we are perfectly fine. Thank you so much for joining Virtual Space here on LinkedIn Live. Thanks to everybody out there. Melanie, I'm inviting you backstage. I have sort of a virtual cocktail prepared for you. I'm joining you in a minute.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
And I just also want to say thank you to everyone. There were just so many great comments, and questions, and it got me thinking a lot as well as these things came in. So thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thanks so much. And I see you in a bit. I'm joining you immediately.
Sounds good.
Bye. Oh, thank you so much, everybody out there, for your amazing comments, for your questions, for your examples that you were sharing with us, and for being with us as every Friday at 3 p.m. If you Google Virtual Space Hero, we have already the whole guest lineup for 2020 ready, and I'm already full with people until mid-February. I'm really happy. I'm working on our live sessions. I'm happy to receive any feedback, and also if you have topics you would like to suggest, I'm happy to put them on my list and look for speakers, or even if you want to suggest a speaker. And by that, next week, we are changing a little bit our focus, but only slightly. Next week, we're going to definitely first to another continent. So we are moving to the US, and I'm happy to have with me Stephanie Height. And our topic will be, I need to cheat sheet a little bit here. Our topic is leading collective efficacy in the virtual space. She also just published a book, and I'm really happy to have Stephanie next week with me here. I'm hoping to see you all there as well. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for your comments, for your support, and thanks a lot for being with us. Thanks, Amelie, and thanks to everybody who was there with us. With this, I hope you enjoy a beautiful Friday afternoon, morning, or good night, whatever you are having. And I see you next Friday. Bye.